Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Well Off Podcast. I'm your host, George Masri. I almost said Horge. But anyways, thanks for joining, guys. I really appreciate you tuning in and leaving us reviews and feedback and letting us know what you think. And if there's ever anything specific that you want to hear about or you want me to discuss, any particular guests that you want to see on the show, then please feel free to reach out. But on today's episode, I did speak to Shawn Rhea. Some of you guys may have heard of him. You've seen him on other podcasts, but he's an active investor. He started at 25 years old, had a bit of a rough childhood in terms of finances, and decided he didn't want to be stuck in the rat race. So he started investing at an early age. And since then, he's actually traveled back and forth between here and Belize. He started investing out there in a really creative strategy. I love that he just kind of thought outside the box. He did replicate somebody else's strategy, but the idea of doing what he's doing is really cool. It's not very common. So many different ways to make money in real estate. And I think you guys are going to enjoy hearing about that. He also talks a little bit about his portfolio in the Niagara region. So good things in here. You can listen till the end and figure out if you want to reach out to him, his Instagram and all that he shares with you guys. So make sure to check him out. Shawn Rhea, Instagram. That's his profile. And if you guys want to connect with me, you can go to welloff.ca/report to download some free reports, or just welloff.ca and book a call. And I'm always happy to get to know you guys. Once again, always appreciative of you listening, sharing this with your friends and family. I hope you'll enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm here with Shawn Rhea. Shawn, who is actually in Belize right now. It's pretty awesome. Welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be on this podcast. I've listened to lots of other previous guests, so I'm just grateful to be a part of it.
Awesome. I know we got a lot to talk about, but let's just start off the way I normally do, which is tell me a little bit about your childhood, something you remember from back in that time, and maybe where you grew up.
Yeah. So basically, like starting off, I guess I grew up in a single family home. So it was just my mom and myself. I was an only child. My parents split up when I was about 8 years old, and I saw my mom struggle financially quite a bit, especially, as I was growing up. And with kids, everythlything's expensive. And as you become a teenager, you're like, 10, 11, 12, before you're actually working and stuff like that. I realized that, my mom didn't really have the means to like buy me the stuff that I wanted and that I saw other kids were getting. And I always felt like, oh man, I just don't have all of the things that I wanted. And I started working at a really young age, at about 13 years old, doing like paper routes and flyer deliveries, stuff like that. And didn't really ever have a good grasp of what financial literacy is. I didn't know how to like save money. I didn't know about investing. I was just told, you got to get a job, you got to work, you got to go to school, you got to study, and then get a job and go from there. And so I did exactly that up until like my mid-20s, basically. And I personally struggled financially all the way up until my mid-20s. So I was using credit cards, racking up debt. I was going on vacations that I couldn't afford. I was basically doing everything wrong up until my mid-20s.
Yeah, I read a little bit about that. You were living, I guess, paycheck to paycheck until about 25 years old. And then what changed for you? What made you want to start investing and like kind of create this life for yourself, this change for yourself?
I'm going to go back to say like some podcast episodes, I say like it was reading a book, right? But it really was just me having a change in mindset, right? And that's what altered the course of like my life, was just having this flip in mindset of like looking at, everything around me completely differently. And the reason that I did that was because I found a motivation. So I found something that motivated me to get out of my comfort zone, which a lot of us can relate to. Of like, your comfort zone is like, you go to school, you become educated in something, you build a career in that, you get your money, and then, you buy a house, you have a family, and you have kids, and you have nice cars, and you go on a couple of vacations a year. That's a comfort zone, right? That's what 95 to 99% of people are doing with their lives. And for me, the trigger, the motivation was my child. So I had my first daughter, and as soon as I had my daughter, I realized that I was struggling to spend time with her, not because I didn't want to. It was because I had so many responsibilities just to be able to pay the bills, and keep a roof over our head. I had to work so much, and I'm like, this system's broken.
Yeah.
And that was what flipped my mindset.
Yeah. A child will make a big difference. We're about to have our first, so I know, like, curious to know what it's going to feel like. I know it's going to be very different, but that's awesome. So what does your life look like now? I know you just, like we just said, you're in Belize, and you were telling me earlier that your family came with you for a few months earlier this year. Tell us a little bit about your life now.
So through real estate investing, the only reason that I'm doing this right now is because I've had this flip in mindset, and I started working on myself, which then allowed me to educate myself on some different things that I wasn't aware of, like financial literacy and assets and liabilities. And that was through, reading all of these books and listening to these podcasts, like this, and listening to other people's journeys. And through that, I was able to absorb all the information and start taking action on my life, on my personal journey, and through a bunch of investments over the years since I started investing. I've literally changed my life, and I've built up a sizable portfolio in Canada, and I started building a portfolio here in Belize in the Caribbean. So I'm spending time here, kind of like business, pleasure, kind of lifestyle, some personal growth stuff, which we can get into. But all of it was through real estate.
So I have two questions for you. The first one is, how did you figure out that you needed to work on yourself in order to change your life? And then I'll ask you the second question after you answer that. Why did
I need to work on myself to change my life?
How did you realize you need to work on yourself to change your life?
Because through the readings, like I almost want to say teachings, like when I read a book, you realize that the person who wrote this book has already went through their entire journey, right? And they're writing a book about their life now, and they're teaching other people. So that's why I say through teachings, I realize that the one common denominator amongst most, if not all, successful people who stay successful throughout their life is that they have a change in mindset. It's not just, oh, well, I'm just going to start investing money because I read a book, but they're still negative. They're still a negative person, and they still surround themselves with negative people, right? That was one mindset shift, was who am I spending my time with, right? And I was spending time with people that were not necessarily lifting me up. And that's a change in mindset as you change your circle, because then you realize, okay, I need to be more cognizant of who I'm actually surrounding myself with and who I'm spending the majority of my time with. And as I started to filter some people out and filter some people in, and that circle started changing, I started thinking differently, because I started thinking like these other people who were already very successful and doing really well in life. And I found that the more I related to them, the more like hungrier I became. And as I became more hungrier, the more successful I became, and doors started opening for me. So it all came back to that's why I decided that, I really need to focus on my mindset. And now I'll say that, above real estate, above investing, above becoming a millionaire, a billionaire, you will never sustain that for your entire life unless you change your mindset and focus on that first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So, so basically starting to read, it kind of opened your eyes, and it made you want to understand more and to work more on yourself, and then surround yourself with better people, people that are kind of not better people necessarily, but people that are on the same journey as you, that have similar goals and whatnot. And by being around those people, it created this fire in you to be more successful and to achieve more. So it was kind of like a snowball that just kept growing and growing.
Yeah, it's a compound effect, exactly, because you make one little tweak with your mindset or with your daily habits, and then you start taking actions with that, and you're consistent, and then that compounds with the next action that you take, and then before you realize it, people don't even recognize you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's amazing, because sometimes you look back and you think, I'm not really doing that much. Like I accomplished a few things. But then you look back at like where you were 3, 4 years ago and you think, wow, like my life is completely different from what it was back then. And it's just these little things kept adding up and made this big change.
Yep, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true. It's crazy, but it's real, and that's why people say like, how do you get an elephant? One bite at a time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's just all those little steps, all those little things that you do every day.
Yeah, for sure. So to go back to my second question, which was about Belize. So can you tell me what are you investing in? Like what do the investment properties look like out there, and why did you start investing there?
So one of my dreams when I was younger, before I ever got into real estate, 20 years old, 19 years old, I flew to Cuba. And it was my first time ever seeing like a beach like that. And it was just tropical and white sand and the music and the palm trees and just that whole vibe. I fell in love with it. And I'm like, one day I want to have a house that's on the beach. And, I want to be able to spend a lot of time in an environment like this because it made me feel happy and healthy. But that wasn't something that was realistic at that time for myself financially. And as I started investing in real estate, and I started, building up some capital and some equity in some of these properties that I had. I started really actually looking at it seriously. And so I started looking at different countries. More recently, like this within the last couple of years, I started looking at different countries that I could invest in as a Canadian citizen. And Belize ended up coming up on my radar just for the ease of access and, barriers of entry being so low, which is what attracted me most. And then I did more research. I found out about the taxation. I found out there's no capital gains. I found out that English is their first language. So all the contracts are in English, and all of that just kind of pointed me in the direction that I'm like, this makes the most sense. And I ended up connecting with a bunch of realtors down here. And the first thing that I invested in was a vacant plot of land. So I bought that in January of last year, just before COVID started. And I bought it sight unseen. I'd never been to this island of Ambergris Caye. I just watched a lot of YouTube videos. I asked a lot of questions. I connected with a lot of realtors and stuff down here on the island. And so I ended up pulling the trigger on that. And then fast forward to March, COVID happened, and world was on lockdown. Everybody was going crazy. Stock markets are dumping. And all of a sudden I started seeing some listings of some of these properties coming up, and they were like really, really well priced. And I reached out to my realtor and I'm like, hey, learning what I learned in Canada, which was you make money on the buy. So I knew that these listings were low based on like other research and comps that I've looked at. And I just started putting in low offers on a bunch of properties, like same thing that I would do in Ontario. And I guess because of what was happening with the COVID and pandemic, people were looking to actually exit out of some of their investments. And I ended up scooping a bunch of those up right during the middle of the pandemic. And so I ended up buying about 5, 6, 7 parcels of land during COVID without ever being here. And then this year, earlier in the year, I flew down. So we're talking like a little bit over a year after I've already invested in here and bought a bunch of parcels of land. I flew down and I saw what I bought and I was blown away. I was like, I cannot believe that I own this for what I paid for it. So it was one of those things where it's like I went on my gut feeling, and that gut feeling ended up like surprising me when I got here. And so I ended up buying like 14 more parcels of land during the 3-4 months that I was here this year. And then we bought a condo as well because my kids fell in love with the island.
Cool. So you're buying like just land, nothing on it?
Yeah, it's vacant land with like bushes, palm trees,
Cool.
sapodilla trees, stuff like that. And then what I ended up doing was, while I was here, those first 7 that I bought last year, I paid some local guys to clear them. So we cleared all those lots out. And then I've since resold some of those for about 2-3 times what I paid for them last year.
Wow. Awesome. And what do you plan on doing with the land? Like, are you going to build on there or just hold on to it and sell it later?
Yeah. So we always talk about, as real estate investors, like cash flow, right? So with that being my principle in Canada, that the reason that I think most people should invest in real estate is not for the equity appreciation or whatever, because you have no control of that. Some people do that and they like to bank on that. And if they do, good luck. But I always say you should invest for cash flow. So with that being said, the properties here, I don't necessarily plan on even flipping them just for cash. I'm actually getting a residual cash flow from these. So the ones that I've sold, what I do is I hold the land in my name and I give them a 90% mortgage. So I'm giving them a 90% vendor take back. I charge them 10% interest on the money for 30 years. So I'm collecting payments on the land for 30 years at a 10% interest. So that also gives me a bunch of cash flow, right? So this is actually a cash flow play here, but you could sell it for cash, 2, 3, 4 times whatever you paid for it. But I don't think necessarily that's the smartest play unless you need that capital right away. Otherwise, I'd be looking at it more as a cash flow play. You can also build cabanas or casitas, or you can build concrete houses, up to you. And then you can rent those out on Airbnb as well.
Awesome. So the people that are doing like the VTB with you on the buying end, what are they doing with the land?
They're mainly retirees. They're not necessarily investors. So they're more on the retail end, right? So there's a couple that they just got here. They're from Tennessee, and they purchased a plot of land off me. They're actually staying here in this condo complex where I am. And I met with them yesterday, and I was asking them the same plan. So they're in their 50s, right? And their plan is to pay it off during the term that they have. I've given them no prepayment penalty, which means that they can pay me in advance in full, and I won't charge them any extra fees at any point. But for right now, they're paying 10% interest on that. Once they do end up paying me, then their plan themselves personally is to build their own residence here as they retire, which they're planning for the next 5 to 10 years to retire. So that's kind of what I think most people are looking at. And that's where I've seen most interest is retirees coming in. They're looking to retire in 5, 10, 15 years. They want to secure something now because they believe that the price of that land is going to be tenfold by the time they retire. So they're trying to secure something now.
Cool.
And that's kind of what I see.
That's pretty cool. So you bought a piece of land, let's say, and then you clear it out, remove some of the bushes and trees, and then you offer somebody a VTB, you offer them a VTB. They purchase the land from you with the 90% VTB at 10% interest. So I'm assuming the price that they paid is higher than what you paid for it originally. You're saying you made 2-3 times the price of what you paid. So you're making money on the sale of the property plus on the interest payments. So you're kind of double dipping.
Yeah, you're making a big return.
Yeah.
So we're talking probably 10x on what you pay cash. Nice. Yeah.
Cool. And you're going to do that with all the land you bought, basically.
No, not all of them. Some of them we're actually keeping and we're going to build. So I've bought some of these with my friends, like investor friends, right? So they're also like, I have some business partners that we own some property in Ontario, and some of the lots that we've purchased, we actually have a plan to like build something. We might build a hostel. There's a need for the hostels in the area. So we've been talking about plans of building a hostel. We see a lot of, I've been talking with some of the guys that are doing bigger stuff here on the island, and they have some partners that are coming in from Tulum and doing stuff that are very similar to Tulum style. So we're kind of waiting right now. We're going to see how the landscape changes over the next 5 to 10 years and see if people actually start bringing in these Tulum style resorts and stuff like that. There's plans for some world renowned resorts coming into that area within the next several years that are being proposed right now. So if all of that stuff happens, we're much more likely to be building than we are to be selling, because it would be a lot more valuable to build on them.
Awesome. Well, good luck with all that. That sounds like an exciting project, and lots of it's very creative. You're coming up with things that are different. I'm sure not a lot of people are doing what you're doing, so that's great. To switch...
I actually did get this idea though, just so that people don't think that I figured this out on my own. I copied this from somebody else. So this same strategy was taught to me by another realtor who lived here for 15, 20 years and was investing while he lived here. He now lives in France with his wife, but still he holds 40 mortgages on the island. Nice. And that's how I learned the strategy was from him. So I always say, don't reinvent the wheel, right? Yeah. You got to connect with other people who are doing great things and learn from them.
Oh, for sure. That's what most successful people do. They just replicate what others are doing. So good for you for doing that and for having that success. I wanted to ask you about your properties in Ontario. I know you invest a little bit in Port Colborne. I don't know if you're in other cities as well, but how are things going there? Are you holding on to your properties? Are you starting to sell them and maybe take your money to Belize? What are you doing now?
So when I first started investing in real estate, I remember everybody always said like buy and hold, don't sell, don't sell. And I'm still kind of on that page where I'm like, I'm going to just buy and hold. I'm going to keep onto these assets and hold on to these assets. And I'm going to see what happens over the next, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I guess. I don't really have any plan on just liquidating my assets there. So right now I'm not selling. I haven't really sold any. I've had to sell one through a joint venture partnership that I had. But that's all that I've really sold. And so I'm continuing to invest actually in Ontario. So I'm still building my portfolio there. We didn't do many acquisitions this year. We bought 4 rental units. That was it in Ontario. I think it was 4. I think that's all we bought was 4. But yeah, so we're still looking to build and acquire more and grow that portfolio. And most of it, I would say 80%, 90% of the portfolio is in the Niagara region. So it's Port Colborne, it's Fort Erie, Welland, St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Crystal Beach, Ridgeway.
So tell me a little bit about that. Like, tell me about Port Colborne and Fort Erie and some of these other places that you're investing in. I personally invest in Welland. I've been to Port Colborne a couple times to check it out, but what is it that you like about these little cities or little towns?
Yeah, so when I started, it was cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that these, when I started buying like the first fourplex that I bought in Port Colborne, I paid $270 for that in 2019. The second fourplex last year in 2020, I paid $240 for it in Port Colborne. The comps there, well, obviously there's cash flow with 4 units. You're buying in the Niagara region for $60,000 per unit, and you're paying a 2% interest rate to the bank. So the cash flow is like unreal on some of these. Like we're talking like on the buy, you're making $1,000. After turnover, you're making $2,000, $2,500 cash flow on a single property. So the cash flow play was enormous, and that was why we invested there. We weren't really worried about it being a small town and this and that. We weren't worrying about pretty much anything, not even the condition of the building, because we knew that we could elevate that. So we would buy like something that needs massive, renos, or every single unit needs to be renoed, or some of the units were basically like living for free. We were able to take those at that price point. We were okay with that. But now we're seeing, as you can see, that those fourplexes are now worth $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, even in Port Colborne. So the question now is, what do you do? What's the strategy, right? Which is why you're seeing some people exit and new investors coming in who are newer to that market. I still believe that the Niagara region is going to continue growing. So even though we're seeing these fourplexes between 6, 7, 8, 900,000, I honestly think it's going to continue to grow. And I don't think that all of a sudden we're just going to see a drop off in price. It might stabilize, but I believe that the Niagara region is going to continue to grow in value. I still think it's undervalued for Ontario and for the amount of people that are looking for housing. So I think Niagara region is a great market to be investing in still, and I'm going to personally continue investing in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty crazy just to like see the jump in the last 18 months, maybe I'd say. It's been a huge increase. Like the prices you're seeing in some of these areas are starting to match, like Hamilton sometimes, or places that are more established. So it's good that you were able to buy a couple of these fourplexes under 300, and it's very rare to find. I don't know if you can find anything like that anymore at this time.
The last fourplex that we bought was September of 2020 under that price.
Oh, yeah. Now, what about your tenants? What kind of tenant profile are you getting after you've renovated these units?
So usually on acquisition stage, we're usually looking at lower income tenants. That's kind of generally what we were typically seeing in those multifamily. And the reason for that is because in the past, people that were making, I don't know, let's say like a $30,000 salary, like 2 couples that were making $30,000, they would be able to afford a single family home. So they didn't need to rent. because of the price increases and everything, as we're doing turnovers, we're actually seeing people with like really good jobs that are moving into these multifamilies that are nicely renovated, and they're paying $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 a month. So we're actually seeing that demographic change in a lot of these buildings, which is great, because I have friends who are investing in the same pockets that I'm investing in. And as we turn over one building and then we have someone else that we know turn over another building, we're actually seeing like the street change, and it's actually really good for the region and for the town as a whole.
Yeah, there's some pretty rough homes out in that area. Just like anywhere in Niagara, whatever. Like some homes are pretty bad, but
there's one bad pocket in Port Colborne, which they call, can't remember what it's called, but there's a bad it's a bad pocket. Port Colborne, yeah.
Oh, there's a bad pocket everywhere, but the interesting thing is
Fort Erie is one of the, or Crystal Beach and Fort Erie. So actually Crystal Beach, Ridgeway, and Fort Erie. This is for like anybody that's specifically looking in the Niagara region. Those three towns, they honestly don't have any bad areas. Like you could buy on any street and you're good. Fort Erie, Crystal Beach, Ridgeway.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't really know that area too well, but most places have a bad pocket, or like a small area that you probably want to avoid if possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's great. I'm glad to hear that you're still doing well here and you're starting to invest out in Belize and making things happen out there. So all good things for you. That's great. I wanted to move on to the next section, which is the random 5. I'm just going to ask you 5 questions. You tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Sounds good.
So the first question is, what was the best thing you learned in the last year?
Best thing that I learned in the last year: if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, number 2, in emergency situations, how do you react? I
breathe normally, relax myself, and then make a decision.
There you go. That's awesome.
This is something I'm learning right now with like diving. I'm doing diving. I just went through my dive master certification, and I had a rescue diver certification. It's some of the stuff that we're talking about there, because there's emergency situations, life and death come up.
There you go. That's the perfect thing to do. Number 3, what do you find extremely difficult that most people find simple?
Damn, I don't have an answer for that.
All right. I always get people with one of the questions, so don't worry about it. You can think about that one and come back to it.
All right.
Number 4, what are some things that you don't understand about women? Or maybe just one thing.
I live with a house full of women. 3 daughters and my wife. I don't understand indecisiveness. That's one.
Fair enough.
I got your answer for the previous question. Is skating. I can't skate.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
At all. I've tried and I can't. I suck.
Yeah. Most Canadians find that pretty simple, I guess.
Yeah.
Number 5, what was the last big mistake you made?
Last big mistake? That's an easy one. So the last big mistake was passing on amazing real estate deals because I am being over analytical and realizing that I overanalyze them, and that was a detriment to me. I could have grown more if I had not been so critical on every single aspect.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's pretty common, but it's great that you recognize that. And I'm sure a lot of people, hopefully you inspire someone to not overthink and just go for it. Yeah. So that's it. Then do you just want to tell people how they can reach you and what services you provide?
Yeah. Honestly, the easiest way to reach me is through Instagram or Facebook. So Instagram is just Shawn Rhea, SHAWNREA. Same thing on Facebook. You can reach me. I have a website. It's shawnrhea.com, but social media is the best. So try social media.
Cool. Awesome. And
I'm a realtor. I'm a realtor. So services, I have a property management business here in the Niagara region. So I have my own property management company. So if you need property management services, you can reach out to us. And I am a realtor as well. So if you need help in the Niagara region, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Shawn, thank you for your time. Thanks for doing this. All the best to you. Safe travels, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me.
As always, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the content. And if you did, I ask you to share this with a friend, with a family member, somebody who might benefit. And it's always appreciated if you can leave us a review, especially if you're listening to it on the Apple Podcasts app, or if you're on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe, comment, and your support is always appreciated. Thank you very much.